Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Dose. And with all of the hubbub for the Nintendo Switch successor, all the rumors, all the speculation, well, Nintendo actually responded with a very curious statement. And while I know most people will focus on the time frame of this response because we all want to know when this thing will actually release, but it's something else that Nintendo said here, a bit of a theme that caught my attention. Depending on who you ask, this maybe could even be frightening, but we will talk about that later on today, as well as the possibility of Sony supporting the PlayStation 4 with their first-party content well into the generation alongside the PlayStation 5. And we're talking well beyond just 2023. Before we get started though, do hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and also ring that bell. It helps the channel a ton, so thank you very, very much, but it's also a great way for you to stay up to date with all the daily gaming news. With that said though, let's just go and jump right into our first topic of the week, and I actually think this is a great way to start the week, and that's with none other than Level 5, the studio behind the popular Ni no Kuni and Yokai Watch franchises. They did quietly have a showcase last week where they gave fans updates for several of their upcoming games, including Deca Police, Fantasy Life, The Girl Who Steals Time, Megaton Musashi Wired, Professor Layton and the New World of Steam, and last but not least, we got an update for Inazuma 11 Victory Road. So if you want to see any new gameplay for any of these titles, I will drop a link in the description below. But I mean, I have to say, if I had to choose just one game from this showcase that really impressed me, Deca Police would be the one. This is their new IP coming over to the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation, and much like some of their other games, it's got an attractive art style, but it's also an interesting take on the turn-based RPG genre. You play as a detective who uses a virtual world to solve real-life cases, and I just think that this looks like one of the more promising entries for the genre in 2023. Definitely keep an eye out for this game. Though that right there, that was the big news for this showcase. All of these games are aiming for a worldwide 2023 release outside of Professor Layton, which has a 2023/2024 release window. But yes, Level 5 is indeed returning to worldwide releases once again, and that is fantastic news. There for a while, they kind of abandoned the West to primarily focus on Japan, but it looks like they're back once again, and truthfully, I mean, if you like Japanese games, well, gaming just got a little bit better with Level 5 returning to the West. Now, here's to hoping that they'll finally bring over Yokai Watch 4 to the West as well. I mean, we've been waiting for that one quite long enough, I think, but come on, let's make it happen. Now, as we talked about last week, Forspoken has had a bit of a rough launch. Of course, it didn't review well, so, I mean, that didn't really help matters at all, but shortly after its launch, Square Enix stripped Luminous Productions of any creative freedom going forward and just decided to absorb them into the bigger part of the company itself. Then last week, they voiced their displeasure with its launch. So the writing has kind of been on the wall for a while now, but it somehow keeps just getting worse and worse, as copies of its Steelbook case has now been found in the trash or landfill sites. This is something that's being shared on social media, which is not a great look. Now, this is not the game itself, though. I have seen some confusion on that online, but instead, these Steelbook cases often act as a pre-order bonus for different retailers. So you actually get these Steelbooks alongside your game if you want to swap to a different case or really just as a collector's item. But either way, what this news just kind of goes to tell you is that not enough people were ordering Forspoken to receive these bonuses, and that's why they had so many left over. So in other words, it didn't meet expectations, and these Steelbooks were taking up too much space and storage, so they had to just kind of get rid of them. It's once again just a very unfortunate situation, but it does further confirm what Square Enix kind of alluded to last week. Forspoken has just not done well, and for a big AAA game like this certainly has hurt Square Enix for at least the short term. Let's go talk about Nintendo, though, because there's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation that Nintendo is about set to reveal their incoming Switch successor. I mean, it has to happen eventually, but it seems like most are kind of expecting a 2024 release by this point. Whether that's early in the year or late, we'll kind of play that by ear, but without a doubt, the Switch is starting to show its age. The Switch is now 6 years old. I know. Time just flies by. It's genuinely crazy. Let's slow things down a little bit, world. But yes, this does officially make the Switch one of Nintendo's longest generations without a new console. So history kind of tells us Nintendo is likely to release their next console this year or next. The only problem is, despite the Switch's power and technical downfalls, it is still selling incredibly well. So Nintendo is kind of in this weird predicament of, do we release a new console while the Switch is still selling at a record-breaking pace, or do we instead hold off, which could risk their momentum going forward? It's a balancing act of now versus the future. When Nintendo's Doug Bowser was asked about the Switch successor in an interview with the Associated Press, and his response was kind of interesting, but also familiar. More on that here in just a second. But first, let's just going to take a look at his full statement here, which says, as we enter the 7th year for the Nintendo Switch, sales are still strong. I think we still have a very strong lineup coming. As Mr. Furukawa said recently, we're entering uncharted territory with the platform. It's exciting to see that demand is still there, so nothing to announce on any future console or device, but we are still feeling very bullish about Nintendo Switch. I should be careful about what I personally would like to see in a new Switch, but what I can share is that one of the reasons that even going into year 7, we feel very confident that the Switch can have a strong performance over the next few years is that it is still truly that unique device that you can play in a variety of ways, at home, on the go. One of the things that we look at always is how can we surprise and delight? How can we introduce new, unique ways of playing? That's always in front of our minds. Now, the first thing that everybody's going to kind of notice about this statement is the time frame, because old Doug Bowser here is basically implying that they want to stick with the Switch for the foreseeable future. He essentially says that the Switch successor is not on the horizon because they feel completely confident in the Switch going forward. Not just because it's selling well right now, but also because they have apparently a very strong incoming library, as he says, which as of this moment we know pretty much zilch about beyond Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So I guess that's kind of the good thing here. He is in a way teasing a strong unannounced library, so I mean, there is that. But truth be told, I would not take this statement at face value. I just wouldn't. This is nothing more than corporate speak with a few nuggets thrown in. And what I mean by that is that even if the Switch successor was planned for tomorrow, Doug Bowser, the Nintendo president of America, is not going to announce that in some random interview. Instead, he's going to sidestep the question, which is exactly what he did here by giving vague information and then moving on to talk about the confidence going forward. So what I'm trying to say here is, did we really expect him to say anything otherwise? I don't really believe so. I mean, yes, sometimes people slip up in these interviews. I get that, but I don't look at this response quite in that way. I don't think that this speaks to the Switch successor's release plans whatsoever. However, there was one interesting part of the statement that caught my eye, and that was right at the end where he said, quote unquote, one of the things that we look at always is how can we surprise and delight? How can we introduce new, unique ways of playing? That's always in front of our minds. They have now said this about 2 or 3 times when talking about the Switch successor. And the thing is just kind of knowing Nintendo's history. This is maybe concerning to some degree. If all you want is a more powerful Switch, this idea of Nintendo focusing on new and unique ways to play kind of goes against that logic. Considering they've now alluded to this idea on various separate occasions, which again, just looking at their history, has been a huge part of their strategy pretty much since the Nintendo DS days with the dual screens. We had the Wii with the motion controls, we had the Wii U with the tablet, the 3DS with 3D, and then lastly, the Switch with its hybrid console form factor. Now, some of these unique ideas paid off, they worked out phenomenally well, while others were just kind of so-so. But this statement almost makes it sound like they're going to continue to innovate rather than just simply boost power. Now, does that necessarily mean they'll make a completely unique console that is unlike the Switch in every single possible way? No, not necessarily. And I think that even if they do add some kind of gimmick, I think there's still a good argument to be made here that they'll still use the Switch hybrid form factor as a baseline. I mean, again, let's go back to Nintendo's history here. If we're talking about their history, they do often follow up their widely popular devices with similar consoles but with a twist. The DS to the 3DS, as example, or the Wii to the Wii U. It's almost like Nintendo likes to do things in twos. You have the Nintendo to the Super Nintendo, you have the Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance, or the DS to the 3DS, or the Wii to the Wii U. So, I mean, they do often like to follow up these designs with a new twist. So with that in mind, I'm thinking that there's a chance that we could see something similar here with the Switch Successor. This might not necessarily be a console that is strictly about a power boost, but rather another hybrid console with a twist. Now, what that twist could possibly be, that'll be the interesting part here. Could they go with dual screens once again? Maybe a foldable screen, since we do have that technology now. That could be something to play around with. But nonetheless, I think going forward, just kind of expect the unexpected from Nintendo's next console. If it is just a power boost, great. That's awesome. I love that myself. That's exactly what I want. But if it's not, you might want to keep your minds open to new and innovative ideas. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you have any ideas of what this console could incorporate if they decide to go in that direction? Let me know in the comments below. Now, we're also going to talk about the PlayStation 4 today, because despite Sony's infamous statement leading up to the PlayStation 5 that they, quote unquote, believe in generations, well, here we are in 2023, the third year of its life cycle, and well, it appears that Sony is still committed to releasing some of their first-party titles for the PlayStation 4, and honestly, while I know it's kind of amusing to pick on Sony because their original statement regarding, cross generations and all that, this actually does make complete sense. So what's happening here is that a Naughty Dog listing seemingly alludes to the upcoming The Last of Us multiplayer game mode that they're working on might actually come over to both the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4. In one of their job listings, they do mention that they're looking for an applicant that has a working knowledge of both the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4, which could suggest it's another cross-generation game. But again, this makes complete sense. At the end of the day, this is a live service game, and these type of games are very hit or miss. There's a lot of risk with releasing these type of games, as, well, Ubisoft has surely proven by this point, and while the best way to increase their chances of success is to bring them to as many players as they possibly can. So even if there's a fraction of PlayStation 4 players still in that console, it's still a viable way of maximizing their player base. And truthfully, for that matter, with Sony's recent PC initiative, I would not be shocked at all if Factions as well as other Sony live service games also release on PC day and date. Now, I'm not talking about their single-player games or anything like that. This is just in regards to their live service titles, but I could see them doing PC day and date. Now, they might stagger them as we saw with The Last of Us Part 1. You can't rule that out, but again, I would not be surprised one way or the other. Regardless, the PlayStation 4 might live well into the future with new first-party PlayStation games. I mean, if you told me back in 2013 that the PlayStation 4 could possibly still be getting new games in, let's say, 2023, 24, 25, maybe even 26, yeah, I'm not sure I would have believed you, but here we are. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, do you think Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League needs a serious delay? This is in the rumor mill right now, and, well, it looks like most of you all absolutely agree that it should be, with 76% of you saying yes, while only 13% of you said no. I think that just kind of speaks volumes to what most of you all thought about the gameplay reveal that they showed back at the PlayStation State of Play. It received a lot of backlash online. Fans were just not thrilled with what they showed there. It just came off as another cooperative live service generic type of game, and is not what people were expecting coming from the studio that worked on the Batman Arkham series. It just feels like another game chasing a trend, and I think a lot of gamers out there are just kind of tired of this style of game. Maybe if it came out 4 or 5 years ago, maybe it would have had a little bit more success, but I think now fans are just kind of, they've just kind of moved on, and that's one of the problems with having a game in development for 8 years. But yeah, I do kind of agree with you all here. I did see several of you all in the comments mention that it doesn't need a delay, but rather it just needs a flat-out reboot. But for as long as it's been in development, I don't think that that's really an option. But one thing that I think that they could do is something that I saw mentioned in the comments last week, and that's to delay the game and just basically take all that live service content that they had planned to release, over months or years at a time, just kind of just put it all in there day one and just make it a better overall game. I think that could maybe help things a little bit instead of just kind of straggling it along. But yeah, I think the results here again just kind of speaks volumes to what people think of its gameplay reveal as of right now. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.